Shalom, greetings from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Editor's Note. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and in today's edition, we aim to focus on multiple issues throughout the region, including relations between the United States and Israel, the implications for the Middle East, and much more. To do just that, I am delighted to have Ambassador Dani Ayalon, Israel's former Deputy Foreign Minister, Ambassador to Washington, and a long list of other positions, including the Chief Policy Advisor at the Prime Minister's Office, and so on and so forth. It's always a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much. Always good to be here.
Indeed. Well, Dani, when we spoke a bit earlier, I thought it would be beneficial to point out, to start with a header, so to speak. Do not underestimate your enemies. I think this is a lesson that needs to be learned, not only post-October 7th, once again failing to recognize the intentions of the enemy rather than the capacity with which they intend to carry out their intentions and their will to push forward against all odds, irrespective of reality on the ground sometimes, which is disruptive to the thinking of Western minds, which are somewhat more logical in most cases. What are we to take out of that, and how can we apply that notion vis-a-vis, if we may start, with the Gaza Strip?
Well, first of all, Jonathan, I think we should take a look at the historical record and understand who we are facing, whether it's extremist Islamists or Nazism. All those fanatic ideologies are not changing. And if they do, it's only tactical. We should not give the benefit of the doubt as we did in the past. Chamberlain gave the benefit of the doubt to Hitler, and we ended up with World War II. Very naively, President Bush, 43, after his meeting with Putin, said, "I looked into his eyes and I saw his soul." He didn't realize it was a very dark soul. And since then, we saw Crimea, Ukraine, before that even Georgia, and it's not over yet. So when we look into the future at this point in time, we must have a real center of gravity. And if we do not face those threats right now, not based only on the capabilities, but also on the intentions. And if you look at, let's say, Putin's rhetoric and also actions on the ground, you see what are his intentions. It's not just the Ukraine. If you look, further than that, it's the Latvia and Litva, all the Baltic, maybe Poland, maybe Romania. This has to be put in front of everybody's mind, certainly the decision makers. And this would be, I would say, a job of intelligence communities to give an analysis boldly and not without euphemism and without rounding sharp corners. This is the same with Giuliani in Syria, the same with Iran, the same with North Korea, the Chinese, and everyone in between. And of course, in our Middle East here, we still have a major, major threat with Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and those who back them, including Turkey and Qatar.
Indeed. Well, you know what, despite me wanting to dive somewhat deeper into the Gaza Strip angle of this and very important points which you just raised, I think with regard to the intelligence communities, as of the last several years, if I may, it seems like the net assessments were policy-driven rather than reality-driven, where intelligence agencies very often would go with the narrative of the figures in office rather than provide the raw data and then allow decision makers to draw from reality on the ground and then create those policies that accommodate the necessities to push for national security interests and so on. Is that something you also recognize, and to what degree does that impact decision making throughout the Middle East in particular, but also specifically vis-a-vis the Islamist Hamas terrorist organization and the 20-point plan, which President Trump put forward, and we're just seeing the first phase semi-implemented. We still have 3 hostages, of course, the remains of 3 hostages, 2 Israelis, 1 Thai national, in Hamas captivity in the Gaza Strip, which we are longing and praying for their immediate return, since Hamas is already in breach from 72 hours into
Yeah,
President Trump's outline.
yeah. Well, we see a phenomenon of a real danger where there are no closures to anything. You know, you have too many a ball up in the airs, whether it's the Gaza file, whether it's the Lebanon file, Syria, Iran, of course, and everything in between. And sometimes there is either a specific directive from the political echelons, you know, for the from the those who are in charge, and sometimes it's a matter of wishful thinking. Case in point is 2015, when President Obama wanted to exonerate Iran and bring it back into the international community, no matter what may, on the expense of the security concerns of all the U.S. allies, Saudi Arabia and Israel included. And we know that Khamenei and like any other dictators, they can put a nice face, but it's only to cover what they are long-term planning. And the problem here is, if I have to put the finger on, is that in democracies, we see, and rightly so, governments change. On the other hand, the dictators, they have a long-term views and enough time to pursue their views and their plans. Look at Khamenei or at Putin. Now we see Xi Jinping. And this is something that we cannot look the other way. And this is where I'm really trying to address the point of, yes, we, you know, as human beings, we would like to have peace, prosperity. We would love to have equality and justice. But this cannot go when only one side puts it on a pedestal, and the other side, all they crave is power and the riches of the world, where it's rare earth minerals all the way through. And this is why I think it is incumbent upon leaders of today to really put it really in the most realistic terms, as objectives and directives to the military, to the strategic planners, to give them a full assessment of where we are. Because we cannot just close files by saying, oh, it's going to be okay. Hamas is no longer going to be in control in Gaza. Giuliani is going to be now a saint. He's going to join now the Western community. This is not the case, quite the contrary. Lebanon, we cannot just think, oh, just because of some kind of a quasi agreement back under Biden exactly a year ago, that the military powers in Lebanon will take out Hezbollah. So we have to be much more realistic than we have been before, and more importantly, to gear up, to prepare enough capabilities to meet with all the challenges, which are certainly going to come sooner rather than later, I'm afraid.
Drawing from that, looking specifically at UN Security Council Resolution 2803, which the Trump administration managed to push through the Security Council to gain the endorsement, so to speak, and the mandate to facilitate the 20-point plan within the international fora. And yet, we see the Islamist Hamas saying, we're not going to disarm. We want everybody to disarm in Gaza, to include all the other factions before we even consider doing it ourselves, and it needs to be a intra-Palestinian issue. You're seeing the patrons of Hamas, to include the Qataris in particular, but also the Turks and the Pakistanis, coming out and stating quite clearly and managing to insert this into the Security Council resolution that the International Stabilization Force, as part of the 20-point plan, will only be created and deployed in Gaza after the demilitarization of Hamas. Namely, it's not going to happen without the withdrawal of the IDF, which is a pivotal aspect to what they're trying to bring about. And we're seeing that Hamas is proactively acting to take over the Gaza Strip and reassert its sovereignty, or control rather, and governance over its rivals. Extrajudicial killings are happening every day, and they're not showing any intent to relinquish any type of control. Is the 20-point plan a viable plan or outline moving forward? And if it isn't, since there are reports about Plan B being pushed also by the American team, the Israeli team, and others, what is the alternative?
Yeah, very good question. First of all, I think you're quite right. We don't see any implementation of the 20-point plan, quite the contrary. And the main flaw here is that there is no timeline and no benchmarks. If you want something done, and you know it, Jonathan, in every sphere of life, you have to have a specific, just not a vision. You have a vision, you have a goal. How do you get to that goal? This is why you have to have a timeline, and you have to just, go back with the benchmarks. None of this is included in the 20-point plan, which means a big vacuum.
Except for the release of the hostages within 72 hours.
Right. Which still
isn't fulfilled.
Exactly.
Right.
Even the very first clause there has not been fulfilled. And we do not even see serious efforts, certainly not by Hamas, to really go and dig wherever even the IDF, through the mediators, when they tell them this, we suspect this area or that area, they just ignore it altogether. So what we see here, that certainly Hamas is dragging their feet by the creation of the vacuum. Who wins? It's only Hamas. You mentioned that they are doing all those extracurricular killings, but it's not only that. They are collecting money. They have pretty much reassembled their financial structure of collecting taxes, of extorting money, and they are de facto in control of their part in Gaza, waiting. And this has always been the waiting game, waiting for us, for the international community, to get tired, to be, let's say, focused on other issues, Ukraine, for instance, Europe and other places, so they can encroach and basically de facto create facts on the ground.
Well, there's much still to talk about the Gaza Strip and Hamas. I want to take one step backwards and point out that President Trump has told a very significant media man who he follows very closely, also on Fox News, but also on other outlets, that he's going to ban the Muslim Brotherhood, designated the terrorist organization. It's going to be an executive order as a first step, which would limit the pushback by the Muslim Brotherhood. And then from there, they'll be able to really push the legislation necessary to bring about this successful move, something that long overdue. Israel has come out welcoming it, the United Arab Emirates, others. What are we to take out of it? And is this really going to be successful? Because as we know, the Muslim Brotherhood has many, many types of names and branches, and this is not a small case to build.
Not at all. It's really a network, an octopus, which is worldwide. Case in point is all those demonstrations against Israel. Actually, it's not so much against Israel or Western values as it is for terrorist organizations like Hamas or even Islamic Brotherhood, because they are not calling for the benefit of the Palestinian people. It's specifically Hamas and Islamic Brotherhood. And you know that there is an organization here involved, there is a lot of money, there is a lot of determination, and you see here that there is a longevity in terms of their stamina. This comes only through huge amounts of finances, which go so intricately through all kinds of dawah organizations, hundreds, if not more, than organizations that we have to pursue. So yes, it is a very positive step, certainly in the right direction, to outlaw the Muslim Brotherhood, long overdue. But here again, we have to also have the cooperation, either by, I would say, even by coercion of the main backers of Muslim Brotherhoods, Turkey, Erdogan, and Qatar. If we do not do that, namely the United States and the European countries, I think this is then going to be another dead letter of legislation which has not been acted upon.
At this point, the European Union is also party to it, since it has so many NGOs that push for Muslim Brotherhood interests. And for the main part, not because those Europeans necessarily know what they're doing, but if a Muslim Brotherhood organization opens an NGO, and this NGO pushes for Islamic tolerance and Islamophobia and all kind of things like that, these organizations exploit those funds for their own interests and disregard the European Union's frameworks that they have established to safeguard, so to speak. It's a very sophisticated terrorist organization that is really poised on the downfall of Western civilization at large, and Europe, the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Israel, any country aligned with those Western values that we speak of. They want to establish world dominance through Sharia law, and that is quite apparent. Now, I'd like to move to another direction, since I do want to cover a lot today.
One last thing about
Please
it.
do.
If you want to be operational, task force. If we would see something against, you have to clean house. And that means globally, in the US also, there are cells in Latin America that we know of. You see these mosques springing up. You can see it in the United States, you can see it in Europe. They build more mosques today in the Western world than they do build in the Muslim world. That has to say something.
Can you imagine? Anyways, that is actually a very important point, because state actors are the ones doing it. And they're funneling a lot of money, and they're supporting those organizations politically and in many other levels. But again, this is a whole show just for itself. Lebanon, over the weekend, we had Israel strike the commander, or rather the chief of general staff of Hezbollah today, Tabatabai, a very influential individual. He was responsible not only for the Hezbollah today, as we know it, as the chief of staff, and the rehabilitation of this Iranian proxy in Lebanon, but he was also instrumental in pushing the terror attacks in '83, the attack on the U.S. Embassy, the French Embassy. The U.S. Embassy had 63 killed in that attack. Against the Marine barrack that same year, 241 people. He has been eliminated, finally, in a very intelligence-driven, pinpointed strike, caught Hezbollah somewhat off guard, because it thought it would not get to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Israel is at a point where it says, you know what, Hezbollah is clearly and unequivocally, actually, openly, saying it's not going to disarm, that it's going to push back. and all routes lead to re-escalation.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, I think it was an operation that had to happen because it has come in the wake of many, many steps and counter steps that the Hezbollah ignored. More so, it is that Iran ignored, because what we saw is that from day one, after this agreement, the ceasefire was signed, we saw a massive inflow of smugglers, because they couldn't do it through Syria over ground, but they use every channel possible, marine channels, through North Africa, and of course, tunnels under the Lebanon-Syria border. Even some are coming from the Turkish area as well. And Israel has sent a lot of messages, but these messages were ignored altogether. And it seems like, as we mentioned before, Hezbollah is down, Iran may be down, but they're not out. Quite the contrary. They are trying to learn lessons from before and actually build even a more aggressive machine. So I think what happened with the chief of staff of Hezbollah, which I think was he was as dangerous as Mornia was, that was taken out in 2008,
Wow.
should signal to them that they are crossing red lines. But it has to follow suit, because if now we will see that there is no change whatsoever, and the Iranians again, they're pushing. They don't care about Lebanon. The Lebanon can all go up in flames as much as they're concerned. But here, I think we also should hold responsible the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government, because there is and I can believe they are conflicted, because there are two powers there. The ones mainly driven by the Christians who say, this is now our opportunity to rid Lebanon from the cancer that has brought Lebanon all the malaises, all the tragedies since 1975, which is basically Iran, Hezbollah, Amal, and all those. And there are those who say, well, it will be too complicated to do. We will fall back into a civil war. But if you're not taking a decisive measure, if you stay on the fence, that means you let the bad guys win.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, Ahmed Tabatabai, his elimination, it's quite interesting because, if I'm not mistaken, he was a joint chief of staff together with Mohammed Haidar, who was also in charge of the Syria file for a very long time, a chief counselor to Hassan Nasrallah, operating also on the Iranian file a very long time. So they were working together.
Sure. You had the Yemenite file with the Houthis.
Correct,
yes.
correct. So there are a lot of aspects there. But within that context, just to establish the timeline, it all started on the 27th of July of 2024, when Hezbollah launched the missile, or rather, well, it was a large missile that struck the soccer field, the football field in the Golan Heights, Majd al-Shams.
12 children.
12 children, all under the age of 18. Many of them just, 9, 8 years old. Girls, boys, 28 others were sustained various degrees of injuries. I see it as if it happened yesterday. Devastating attack. Israel responded vigorously with the elimination of Fuad Shukr, the chief of staff at the time, causing the Iranians to miscalculate with their attack against Israel later. But his replacement, Ibrahim Akil, was then, for a period of time, also eliminated on the 20th of September. So didn't have very much time over command. And then we had Tabatabai and
was brought
Haidar.
back, yes.
They were brought back in order to take over. But this whole process up until the cessation of hostilities of the 27th of November of last year really indicates that the severity of Hezbollah being decapitated, so to speak, in a very tough environment, but yet still eager to rehabilitate itself. We have less than 2 minutes left for today's edition, and yet I think it's very important. Where is Iran in all of this? Since, as we started with the headline that we wanted to point out, do not underestimate your enemies.
Absolutely. As we mentioned, they may be down, but certainly not out. And you see also, Jonathan, with increasing self-confidence, because people like to point out about the vulnerabilities of the Iran, the water crisis, the inflation, the economic issues, social rifts, some defiance of Iranian women taking out their, all the trappings of Islam. This is just nonsense. This is just something that the Iranians are willing to contain at this point. As
They're playing the game.
They're playing the game as they are focusing on what is important for them. And what is important for them is actually the regime is quite strong. So they have reestablished the authority of the regime. So they are now capable of restructuring and reestablishing their nuclear infrastructure. And mind you, Jonathan, we still don't know exactly what happened to the 408 kilograms of enriched uraniums, whether it was 60% or maybe even some say even more than 60%.
440 kilograms.
Yes. What is happening there? And not less so, you see how much capital and how much riches they put towards Hezbollah. So they did not run out of funds, certainly not out of the determinations, and this is now a power of wills. Now it's the time for Israel, and backed by the US, not to stop, to keep going, because this is the only way to keep Lebanon free in the future out of the Iranians' claws.
And Iran will do everything in its power to push back, because it still views, Israel might be the small Satan, but America is the large Satan. And the United Kingdom, they always say, Met Ingilis, right? Death to the English. That's the medium Satan. Right. So there is an equation here that needs to be taken into account. Unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today. Ambassador Ayalon, it's always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a blessed week.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.